Good to have you with us. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Investor's Guide, a show where we try and help you understand all about financial planning and how you can manage your investments. I'm Avni Raja, and on today's episode, we are going to focus on the upcoming budget, which is, as the finance minister herself said, going to be a budget that's never been seen before. Remember, we're emerging out of a pandemic. There's lots that needs to be done. And so all eyes are going to be on this budget. But for you and me, it's going to be extremely important to know whether or not we're going to be left with more money in our hands, whether or not there are going to be any changes or any incentives in terms of taxes that are going to be given to us for our investments. A lot of expectations are riding high on this budget, and let's in fact take a look at everything that we could perhaps see or that is expected. And joining me is Feroz Aziz of Anand Rathi Wealth Management. Feroz, thank you so much for joining us on this edition, and this is an extremely important, obviously, topic that we are talking about right now as far as the budget is concerned. So let's get straight to it and talk about, some of the most important expectations this time round. And let's start off with the expectation with regard to the possible increase in the Section 80C limit, because this has been, static for several years now, and it's high time we see some sort of an increase.
Yes, Avni, I think every year at these times people have expectations. Before I just jump on to the expectations this year, I think every one of us should take note of what has been given to us in the previous budgets. These are periods where you try and see what are the 3-4 things which were gifts given to us and use those. The application of that is what will result with more money in your hands. So that's one thing which I like to highlight before I get on to this one. So like you said, Avni, 80C, Section 80C, which has a 1.5 lakh limit, that has been static from 2014, which is a long period. So almost about 6-7 years, that 1.5 lakh limit has not been increased. So we expect that that would be tweaked, maybe marginally higher, 2.5 lakhs. I think that's what every one of us would look for. And that is very logical because even if you add inflation to that and the salary increases which people go through, 5-7% nominal increase is logical for the government to do. So that's one which I think will benefit across sections of the society, be it the lower strata or the higher strata.
Yes, absolutely, Feroz. And that is something that, I don't know how much room the government is actually going to have this time round to give us, tax breaks specifically in many of these sections. But we'll have to wait and see on that. The other aspect, and this is, strong talks that we've been hearing as far as a COVID cess is concerned. And that is something that we might see being imposed. In what form and who is it going to apply to? Of course, we'll have to wait and see. But this is also one quite big possibility, because the entire vaccine drive is going to run into thousands of crores, which has to be funded.
Yes, Avni, the second point is the COVID cess. I think will be applicable to all sections in different proportions, because the government has to almost have an expenditure of 65 to 85,000 crores to vaccinate the large population we have. So I think this is very logical, and I think this will be a temporary cess. So I think it will not hurt us for long periods of time. And today we have about 6 odd crore kind of income tax filings which are happening. Of course, the larger contribution as a percentage, about 5% comes from 5 crore plus. 41% still comes from people who earn less than 10 lakhs. So if these are not covered in the gamut of COVID cess, I don't think it will move the needle. So to answer your pointed question, COVID cess is a very large likelihood since it's momentary. But I think it will be across all segments for it to collect that kind of quantums for the government to be able to sail through this expense.
Right. The other aspect, Feroz, is, the entire health expenses segment that is going to be, really important to watch out for this time round. Usually it's not really something that has been at the forefront or a priority. It's always been at the periphery. But there are multiple things that from a personal point of view that we could look out for with regards to health insurance, with regards to the ATD, section as well. What would you ideally like to see?
I would definitely like to see 80D being revised upwards, the exemption under 80D, because for two reasons. Of course, COVID has made us introspect on the expense and the way we look at health insurance, because that's one time 100-year kind of an event which has happened the last year in 2020. So I think relooking your health insurance expense is important, and I think the government needs to chip in with a tax discount because we don't have a centralized health mechanism or a health insurance mechanism so prevalent as much as in the emerged countries. Of course, there are schemes which have been launched, but they're far from being implemented across the sections of the society. So I think 80D limit should ideally be doubled so that this whole newly found love towards covering your health becomes more and more lucrative and people secure their financial well-being.
Yes, and the other part, though this is not directly related to the budget, is the fact that there is still an 18% GST as far as health insurance is concerned. Perhaps that is something at least we could hear something about, that it is, possibly that could be looked at going forward.
Yes, Avni, most financial products like mutual funds also have a GST on the expense which the fund manager charges. But I think here, when I think you've raised a very, very valid point, at least a GST exemption will stop pinching the pockets of the people who want to get their health insured.
Right. And of course, the other expectation here is that we might see some sort of an increase in the standard deduction, and it's currently about 50,000. That might go up to as much as 1 lakh. That is also one possibility. How much, if something like that does happen, how much, what would be the kind of benefit that one would see?
Avni, I think these are our wishes, but I think it is logical for the government to incorporate the contemporary lifestyles of its citizens, which is work from home has become a reality. And that's when the standard simple deduction of 50,000 should ideally go up to 1 lakh, because you're not spending on other things like commute, conveyance, and those claims might have come down. So your tax liability has gone up because you're not making expenditures elsewhere. And that's why a standard deduction, which is a straight jacket deduction from your total net income, taxable income, should be very logical. I hope the government looks at this change in the behavioral pattern of salaried employees.
Yes, and one more thing, Feroz, that is also going to be important, though I don't know whether we'll see anything on it because it was just changed a couple of years ago, which is the dividend part of it, and the fact that right now all dividends are taxable as per one's income tax slab. But this perhaps needs to change, at least for the small investors. So maybe to a certain amount, it could be tax-free for, equity funds or, stocks that the small investors buy.
Yes, Avni, I think that's logical because the ideal segment which this would be targeted to is the senior or the super senior citizens who are living out of dividend incomes. Just like on long-term capital gains, there's a 1 lakh exemption per financial year. I think logically enough that should be extrapolated to the dividend, and some limit of dividend either from stocks or from mutual funds should be exempt from the tax, so that the senior citizens could enjoy some tax-free incomes in their hands during their years of retirement.
All right, Feroz, of course, at this point in time, this is, like you pointed out, a big wish list that the small investors and the industry, financial products industry has at this point in time. Some of them extremely valid and extremely necessary. But we also know that the finance minister doesn't have too much wiggle room at this point in time, and we'll have to wait and see how these issues are addressed in the budget. We'll of course talk about the impact that the budget has after it's over as well. But on that note, Feroz, thank you so much for joining us and giving us all that perspective.